Well, thanks for taking the time to speak to me. I assume this is like a bit of a necessary evil for you, is it? The whole press thing.
Um, I don't really mind it to tell you the truth.
Okay.
As long as, yeah,
As long as I'm not a dick.
what?
As long as I'm not a complete dick.
Well, no, that would make it more interesting.
All right, I'll try.
As
I'll do
long as
my
I'm not
best.
just answering the same question every single time, I'm happy with it. I don't
Okay, all right, awesome. Well, I've been listening to the new album a little bit. I haven't obviously completely digested it, shall we say, thoroughly. But I know you've got, the Nashville sound was absolutely massive, and that's a hell of a thing to have to follow. But just tell me a little bit about the new album and how it was going into it, and where you're at with it, and things like that.
mind. Can you be more specific?
Okay. It seems probably a little bit more reflective. It seems to be a bit more, I'm going to say personal, but everyone always says everything's personal, but it is very much about you. And it seems that you're in a happy place and embracing parenthood.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, I don't know if I would exactly say a happy place, but definitely a joyful place. And
Okay.
I think my goal, just in general, is to try to be as aware as I possibly can. And when I go to make an album, nowadays I just don't have the same problems that I had when I was 25 or 35. So I'm not writing necessarily about the same kinds of things. I don't think anybody wants to hear me uh, uh, write a whole album full of love songs or torch songs or songs of longing when in reality, my life is not a life of longing at this point. I do, however, try to stay aware of my position in the world, and I try to write songs that reflect how I feel about other people's lives, and I guess that becomes personal, but it's something that sort of starts externally.
Okay. I mean, I guess I'm thinking about songs like "It Gets Easier," and but I love that line. It gets easier, but it never gets easy. I mean, that's
Oh
obviously
yeah,
incredibly
yeah,
personal, and I'm assuming that that's like complete truth.
yeah. That was pretty autobiographical, and but the intention behind the song um, is really an external thing because I am writing about my own story in a way, but I also sort of felt like um, there's a certain group of people out there who might be in need of a song, and I know a lot of people who've been in the recovery process for various lengths of time, and it comes back to one sort of universal truth, which is it never completely goes away. There's not a cure for addiction per se. It's something that you have to deal with throughout the rest of your life, and um, there aren't a whole lot of really good songs about recovery. So I thought maybe I would write one for those folks and for myself too.
Okay. By the way, I love that. There was something you tweeted about. There was a thing about bad airline passengers, the worst person to sit next to on a plane. It was like, what was it?
It's the worst.
What, the drunk on the plane. The way you said it was you between whatever years it was, I can't remember.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, like '02 and 2012 or 13. It's the worst, and I get angry at people who can't tolerate a screaming baby on a plane because a screaming baby, they can't help it. They don't know what's going on.
they don't know why their ears hurt.
No, and they can't tell you their ears hurt.
Yeah, quite.
But
Talking of
the
which,
range the range of emotions that a small child goes through in the course of a day would be enough to drive an adult completely
yeah, sure. Talking of which, though, I mean, I think "Letting You Go" is absolutely fabulous. It's very
insane. Thank
poignant.
you.
I think people will be touched by it. But it's also, I mean, I could imagine it becoming like a classic at weddings. Everyone's going to want it at when their daughter's getting married, um,
Yeah.
which is, I don't know, it's probably good and bad in some ways, but I mean, I think you come up with an absolute classic, really great song.
Well, thank you. I don't think if that happened, it would be bad in any way. For me, I mean, people might get tired of it, but one of the best things that can happen to a songwriter is that your song gets played enough that people get tired of it. So I'm not afraid of that happening. I do feel like there are some strange choices out there for father-daughter songs at weddings.
Yeah, yeah.
It's hard to find a good one. There are a few, but it's hard to find a good one. And I didn't set out to write a song like that, but by the time I got done with it, I thought, well, this might serve that purpose for some folks. I really just set out to tell the story as honestly as I could, and try to make an emotional song without it being maudlin or pandering. And I think the best way to do that is just focus on the personal details and try to choose the right ones.
Oh yeah, it's awesome. But it's also because it's for everyone. Unlike, say, like I really like that Brandy Carlisle song. Was it Evangeline from 2 or 3 years ago?
That's a great
yeah,
song.
great song. But because it's got the name in it, it kind of makes it very personal to her, and other people are less likely to just sort of pick up and say, "Yeah, we'll have that." Because if your daughter's not called Evangeline, it's going to seem slightly weird. You know what I mean? But yours is.
So it would be really weird for us because my daughter and Evangeline are friends, so that would be even stranger.
Okay. And just, I mean, probably I'd say that is less weighty than some of your subject matter that we have. But just tell me a little bit about Only Children and Overseas. I maybe could do with listening about another 4 or 5 times and really taking it all in. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's funny to me that you say that, and I agree with that. It is Letting You Go probably is the least heavy song on the album to everybody but me.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, okay.
To me, that's the heaviest subject matter of all. But yeah, Overseas is one that I'm real proud of, and it was early in the writing process. I think maybe it might have been the second song. I think I wrote Only Children first and then Overseas next for this album. But Overseas is allegorical. So I'm home with our daughter a lot last year while my wife was out touring. It just happened to be that way, where I took most of the year off, and she was really, really busy with her record with the High Women stuff.
Sure.
And so I was home a lot with my daughter, and I started thinking about how my experience sort of compared and contrasted to the experience of somebody who was in a relationship with an expatriate, and I know some people who are that way. I know some folks who have just decided that they've had too much to deal with in America, and they've gone somewhere else. And sometimes they leave people that they care very much for behind. So I was in a situation where, I wasn't exactly complaining about the situation that I was in because it was completely understandable, and I agreed with every decision that had led up to that point. But at the same time, it was lonely in a way, and I was thinking of that, how it applies to the global fog that we're all dealing with right now, and so the story that I wrote, the surface of the story is one about somebody who's given up on their home and gone somewhere else, and the people who are left behind. But the allegory there is really one of a very personal family story for me. Plus, it's got a lot of loud guitar, which makes me really happy.
Because loud is important, isn't it?
Loud is important, and loud is not really, about what volume you have the song on in your car. It sounds loud even when it's turned down.
Yeah, sure. Okay. As opposed to
that's important to
me. yeah. Well, as opposed to, I'd say, like most mainstream country records, where they're overproduced to hell and they throw everything at it, like a wall of guitars, and it's supposed to be loud, but it just comes out as, I don't know, made by numbers and formulaic and plastic almost.
yes, and a big part of that also is the mastering. I don't know if people are all that interested in the details of this, but when a few years ago, well, I guess it's been a couple decades ago now, but a few years ago, there was this sort of competition that started with mainstream music in general, where in order to get the attention of the people who are programming the radio stations, the mastering engineers started mastering everything louder, and that became a real problem for sound quality and just for separation issues for a listener. It got to the point where everything was mastered to be squashed through radio waves, and then to come out louder than the song before it, so you would notice it more. And that that sort of competition just drove everything to a point where nothing really sounded good for a long
Oh, is
time.
this that whole that like the compression thing?
Yes, the compression just sort of ruined everything.
Yeah, yeah, very much so. You hear stuff, and when you hear something that's been compressed, there's a flatness to it, isn't there?
Right. Yes, and it takes away the dynamics.
It's an unorganic feel, which is, yeah, it makes me feel very uncomfortable. And I've heard records, I can't think of one off the top of my head, but many records you hear it, you think, why did they do that? That would have been so much better without that, if they'd let it sort of breathe a little bit. Yeah, but,
right, and you can't turn those records up. They just get worse the louder you turn them up.
okay.
You can't master for vinyl that way because it'll bounce the needle out of the groove.
Yeah. But it seems completely different to say in the old days, if there were, I don't know, you could play two records on vinyl, one after the other, 45s, and one might sound louder than the other, but it's in a different way, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I mean, that all had to do with mastering. I mean, most people are using the same techniques now, for at least the music that's aimed toward the mainstream. But we don't really do that. The guy Pete Lyman that masters Hair Records, his goal is to try to make everything sound as good as possible, and I think that should be the only real goal of a mastering engineer.
Okay, and that saying that, like, that's your goal and everything. I'm going to say lucky. I'm going to call it an enviable position so far as artists go. And this is the way it appears to me. This might not be the case at all, but it appears that you're in this position because you don't have to compromise on your sound, the mastering, probably anything. I wouldn't imagine you compromising on much, and certainly not your views on things. And that's great, though, isn't that? Because everyone else is told what to say, told what to do. But I mean, do you recognize being in that place, and was it a deliberate thing to get to that place?
It was, yeah, and it is lucky. I mean, it's lucky to be able to make music at all, much less to do it the way you want to. But it did take a lot of work, and it took some courage on my part and on the part of a lot of people that I work with also. Because it's when we decided to start our own label and hire out a label services group and do the things that we wanted to do, keep our ownership of masters and publishing and all that stuff. It was a little scary because I wasn't quite having the success at that point that I'm having now, and you do sometimes you think, well, maybe I need the connections of a major label, or maybe I need the instruction or the guidance of an A&R person. But the experience that I had with the band that I used to be in, the Drive-By Truckers, was one that taught me that it's important to trust your own instincts, and also it's important to develop your own taste so you can trust those instincts. And I've spent a lot of time making business decisions over the last 8 or 10 years, which is not necessarily the most fun thing for me, but it's a hell of a lot more fun than doing what you're told.
And, yeah, I can imagine.
And I mean, it occurred to me at some point there are a lot of people in the world, and if I don't hit the mainstream, that doesn't mean that I can't find a really big audience. I may have to work a little bit harder, but I would rather work harder than compromise the work that I'm doing.
And I think that, and that's something that fans always pick up on and can, I think, recognize in an artist straight away as well. But you've also, I mean, you say you've done that, you've not compromised, and we'll call it mainstream, but it must give you a really good feeling when you can go like number one country album, number one, on various charts, and actually kind of beat the majors at their own game.
It is, yeah, it is a really good feeling, and those things aren't available to everybody. So I wouldn't say that, I definitely didn't start from the bottom and do everything myself. I mean, I've had a lot of help and a lot of luck, and I'm very fortunate to be where I am in that position. But yeah, when you have a record that does well, and it's your record, and you made it the way you wanted to make it, and it sounds the way you want it to sound, and it's used for the purposes that you want it to be used for, definitely, definitely makes me feel good. It also makes me want to encourage other artists to do the same thing if it's possible for them, because I think we've reached a point where, as much as the music industry's changed, one thing that hasn't changed is the fact that record labels still screw you over for the most part.
Yeah.
Not all of them, but there's a story every few days about. I think it's Meg Thee Stallion this week. She's having trouble with her record label, but there's a story every few days about some artist that can't release music, or somebody sold their masters to somebody else without asking, or it's always something, and I like to try to encourage people to have control and ownership over their own work, if at all possible.
Yeah, that's becoming a hot issue at the moment. I mean, it's moved on a lot from, oh yeah, we'd like all your records and here's a Cadillac in payment. It's not got a bit further than that. But
honestly, those Cadillacs were charged back to the artists. So that moved very far. They weren't giving anybody a Cadillac. They were selling them.
Yeah, everything's charged back to the artist. I know.
Yeah.
There's people going, oh, we're having a great time. We've done this. We've flown first class here. It's like, yeah, you're still going to pay for it, mate. But that's the way it goes. But
yeah.
I mean, that's
yes. And then you get home and you can't pay your mortgage.
Yeah. See, that's But the thing is, would you say, and can you identify a point that became the tipping point? Was it when sort of the Americanas went mad for you and you became like, I don't know, I'm going to call you the like king of Americana, or like a figurehead for that movement a few years ago? Was that, and that was just like pre-Grammy, was it? Is that sort of the tipping point?
Yeah, I guess so. But for me, it really happened when I heard Southeastern for the first time, when we finished that album, and it was mixed and mastered, and I heard it. I knew what was about to happen, in a sense. I didn't know everything that was about to happen, but up until that point, it had been uncertain, because I'd never really done this sober before. I'd never made a record sober and played a bunch of shows like that. I didn't know if it was going to work or not. And truth be told, it was just the addicted part of my brain trying to convince me that I should stay in the middle of that addiction. But after Southeastern was finished and I heard it, I thought, oh, this is actually better, than anything I've done in the past, and this is really going to speak to people. And then there were external sources. I mean, there was I think there was a Wall Street Journal article and a New York Times article that both came out in the same day. Like, they both came out while I was on a plane. I think maybe coming back from Europe that year, but I knew what was going to happen, and I knew what we had done, and I knew that things were about to change the first time I heard playback on that record.
Okay, I mean, that's really interesting, because I think that you don't have to be sober to have self-doubt, and I mean, I write stuff, obviously, and I'd never like anything I've written. And then occasionally I look back at something, I think, oh, I actually did all right there. But so I'm familiar with that self-doubt from a different perspective. But it must be so hard for a musician or somebody who's making a record when you've heard it so many times. It's like, let's just do another take on this. And you've heard it, and until before you hear that finished product, you've heard it. You're probably getting sick of it already.
Well, I mean, I don't get sick of them much anymore, but I do have a hard time sometimes separating myself as a listener from myself as a creator. And I think that's something that you have to really, if you're in control of your own work in a way that I am, you have to spend a lot of time and a lot of energy trying to separate the listener in yourself from the creator in yourself, just in order to decide if an album's done yet or not. Up until the recording of this record, of reunions, I sort of tried to ignore the stress that went into writing and recording a new album, and I pretended like it wasn't there. I pretended like there wasn't any pressure, and that kind of came to a head when we were recording this one, and my wife was noticing that I was acting differently, and it to me just seemed like I was focused, but in reality I was feeling a lot of pressure and just not allowing myself to acknowledge that. So I think the process of making reunions for me was a big one on a personal level, because afterward I started being a little bit more honest with myself and admitting to myself that it's okay to feel that kind of pressure. Because we just made 3 really, really great albums, and that's not an easy thing to do. It took a lot of work and a lot of focus and a lot of time, and to follow that up is a thing that's a little scary. And I'd always said in interviews and really in my own brain that I don't care. I'm not worried about that. That doesn't bother me. But in truth, it does. It does.
Okay, all right, that's nice. I mean, actually, not that long ago, my partner spoke to your wife when we had the Highwayman on the front cover of the magazine,
Yeah.
and she really enjoyed that. By the way, just a few weeks ago, I spoke to Patterson, so we'll probably have the drive-by truck as well as you in our next issue of the magazine, which is going to be kind of cool. So it's all very connected. But I know it's just if you don't mind talking about your wife for a moment, but the Highwayman thing, and you've been out. I mean, I know there were videos of you're just playing guitar in the background, some of their gigs, but you're very supportive of her causes and her career, and also what should we say, almost a feminist. If a man can ever truly be a feminist, you know what I mean? I like that thing you were doing with the wearing shirts with girls' names on it and whatnot, encouraging that. Yeah, because that is something.
I think I think everybody should be treated equally. Unless they've done something to deserve different, they should all be basically on the same level. And in my mind, a lot of the problems that we're having in America and just society in general, could probably be solved if we would listen to everybody's ideas. And I think when you view women as second class citizens, which most men do, in all honesty, have something in the back of their mind that when they see a woman or when they talk to a woman, they feel differently than when they see or talk to a man. And I think if we could get that out of our heads and really just treat everybody like people, we would have a lot more good ideas. And it might be a little bit easier to get ourselves out of the particular pickle that we're in right now. I started off my life in Alabama in a place that was very male dominated, and I learned a brand of masculinity that didn't really serve me well when I got out in the rest of the world. And,
okay.
I mean, you can't fight about everything, and you can't keep all your emotions inside, and you can't use feminine as an insult. These things they don't work when you start traveling and meeting cool people and opening up your mind a little bit. So the last 20 years of my life have been a process of really trying to work toward a point where I view everybody as just a human being and start from there. And it's made me a happier person. It's made my relationships better. I mean, I know guys that I grew up with who don't have any women friends, just because all their friends are the boys, and women are for something different to them. And I think that's a good way to limit your life and really ensure that you're not going to be as happy as you can be.
Okay, the other thing is we've got to do something to help. Going back to the first, what have I done there? I was playing that earlier, by the way, and my other half
What?
said, "What have I done?" Is fuck all.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And that's the thing. It's. I think we should spend time, you know, asking ourselves what we can do, and it's very easy in this country for you to get inside your bubble and think, well, you know, um, politics don't really apply to me, or social dynamics, cultural dynamics don't necessarily apply to me because I'm happy with my family and I work hard and I have the things that I need. And I think that the privilege of that viewpoint, when people get tired of hearing about gender equality, or they get tired of hearing about political issues, just the opportunity to get tired of hearing about those things is a great privilege that normally goes. Um, um, it what's the word? It goes unnoticed, I think.
Yeah, sure. I mean, when we had
that privilege, it's for the least of us, politics are as important as getting up in the morning and putting on their shoes, because people need help, and it's not necessarily because of anything they've done, but maybe it's because of how they started off in the world. The thing with the Highwomen, I guess, to get back more to your question, I love the work that they're doing. I love the record, and I like all of them a lot. And it was so much fun for me to just play guitar for a while. The show we did at Newport with the Highwomen and Dolly Parton was the first show that I think I've played in 20 years where I didn't have a microphone in front of my face.
All right, cool.
Guitar, and it was exquisite. I had a really, really good time.
Well, I couldn't help noticing. I think it was on the Facebook. It might have been the Southeastern Facebook page that you got a gig coming up at Wrigley Field with, was it Chris Stapleton and the Highwomen and you? I mean, that's nice. Yeah. I guess you get to go there as a family, but that sounds like a massive gig.
And Mike Campbell's on that show too. Yeah, that's an exciting thing. That's going to be a whole lot of fun, and to be involved with what Amanda's doing, that's just part of being a good husband, a good family member, and luckily for me, the music she makes is great, so I don't have to tolerate it. I can actually enjoy it.
Yeah, it must be difficult if you hate it.
It would suck to just be married to somebody who's just a beautiful person, but their songs are terrible, and you got to go out and play their songs.
Yeah, I can. There's a few of those I could name, but I'm not going to.
I know, me
too. So the mainstream is not necessarily a bad place to be as long as you haven't compromised. Is that right? Because I'm thinking about your "Star Is Born" song as well. The song you got in there, which is, if I say it's actually really good, it sounds like I'm surprised that it's really good. But you know what I mean? You wouldn't expect to find that in there.
I was a little surprised by that movie too. I mean, when I first heard the idea, I thought, "Oh, there's no way that Bradley Cooper's going to pull this off," because it's been made so many times, and the version with Streisand and Christopherson, as much as I love both of them, wasn't really a great movie. So yeah, I was skeptical going in, but I read the script and I talked to Bradley, and it looked to me like he was going to do a good job. And then when I sent the song in, they didn't change a word. They didn't change the melody. They didn't change anything about it. That's not usually the case when you send a song in for a Hollywood movie. So when that happened, I thought, well, at the very least, they're going to treat my song the right way. And then the movie turned out to be good too. It was shocking. I'll say that it was shocking. I don't think Bradley had ever directed anything before, and Lord knows he hadn't sang on camera before. So, yeah, I was surprised at how good the movie turned out, and the experience was a great one for me, simply for the fact that they didn't change anything about the song that I wrote.
Yeah, it was almost surprisingly left field, wasn't it?
It was, yeah, it was. It was honest. I mean, the song's pretty subversive for that kind of a movie, and the fact that they included that kind of a song, to me, it just spoke to the fact that Bradley was trying to make an honest piece of work, and I think he did. He did a good job.
It should be good for a royalty check every year for quite a while, I would think.
Yes, there's only a couple songs on that album that just had one songwriter, and that was one of them.
Yeah, okay. No, it's a nice thing to have in your arsenal, as it were, isn't it?
Right. Yeah, and I own my own publishing, which most people in this town don't. So that was a nice thing.
Yeah, I bet. That must make a massive difference. Well, look, I think I've probably overstayed my welcome and taken more time than I should. And I'm sure I got plenty there, Jason. It was really good to speak to you. I was hoping for something really outrageous. I was hoping you were going to say, I don't know, go off on a rant about something. Give me a massive headline like, I don't know, somebody sucks and stuff.
Yeah. Find a really, just take a few words and rearrange them and context.
Yeah. Not really my style.
We'll read it. But the problem is now they don't go from the headline to the article. They just read the headline.
Yeah, just the clickbait.
Yeah.
Some clickbait in the headline. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, just make the headline the whole article. That way, everybody will be forced to read it.
Okay, we'll do. All right. Well, look, good luck with this record. I'm sure it's going to go well for you. You'll be picking up more awards before long, and let me know how it goes when everyone's dancing to your songs at weddings.
All right, I appreciate that. I will.
All right. I hope so. But thinking back how we started, did I end up being a dick or not enough of one?
No, you were great. No problem at all.
All right. Well,
you would know by now if I was not having a good time.
Okay. All right. All right. Thanks, Jason. It was an honour and a pleasure.
All right, Duncan. Thanks
Good
for
luck.
your time.
Cheers. Bye bye.